Government Elections and Pensions to order. Matt, would you please call the roll?
Senators Black, Henderson, Beck, Brattin, Berger, Crawford, Nicola, Nuremberg.
We do have a quorum. I move we go into executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. We're now in executive session. I move to bring up Senate Bill 10. Do I have a second? Have a second. Senate Bill 10, we heard on January the 21st. Some of you will hopefully remember that had to do with design build and obviously a sunset on that. Senator Hough, I believe, was the senator that provided us Senate Bill 10. Does anybody have any discussion on that directly? And most of you here should know that I'm going to offer a committee sub as well. That information was sent out to you last week, either on Thursday afternoon late or Friday, one of the two. Okay? All right, I have a Senate committee substitute ending in .02C, which was distributed last week, and I move for its adoption. Do I have a second? I do have a second. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the changes. Matt provided me with good information about that, and I have looked over some. It was things that were brought up immediately after that session was over on the 21st. Purpose of this bill? Oh, okay. Matt said that Senator Hough did, when he was discussing, did discuss that we would have a Senate committee substitute with these changes included in that. Hopefully some of you remember that. I do have both the paper copy here if you need that. But that Senate committee sub eliminates the 2026 expiration date on the statutes allowing political subdivisions to use design, build, and construction management at risk as construction delivery methods, if they so choose. Because after 8 years, the language has proven to work and provide good options. I do have some bill background if we need to go into that. I do want to read through a set of bulleted points dealing with design, build, and CM at risk background. Design, bid, build method has the 3 phases, and each must be completed before moving on to the next. The owner contracts separately with the designer and contractor. Design, build methods allow for the single contract for both design and construction. Its benefits include higher quality project outcomes, early and continual collaboration and communication between the design and construction teams to deliver faster, more cost-effective project delivery. It's estimated that around 45% of construction projects use this method at this time. Construction management at risk, we'll go through a couple things with it. The owner contracts with the construction manager to oversee the entire project, and the construction manager acts as the owner's representative on all phases of the project. The construction manager sets a guaranteed maximum price for the owner on the project cost, and thus being at risk for cost overages and making up the difference. The contract can include a cost-sharing agreement that can award the CM, construction manager, if the project comes in under cost. Is there any further discussion on a Senate committee sub SB10? Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, same sign. I move that we do pass Senate Committee Sub, Senate Bill 10. Do I have a second?
Second.
Matt, please call the roll.
Senators Black,
Aye.
Henderson,
Aye.
Beck,
Aye.
Brattin. Berger. Crawford. Nicola. Nuremberg. 7-0.
By a vote of 7-0, we have passed Senate Committee Sub for Senate Bill 10. I now move to bring up Senate Bill 22. Do I have a second? I do have a second. Senate Bill 22 was heard last week. Senator Brattin, would you care to give a brief summary? And if I remember right, we're going to have some changes, correct? So,
Correct.
Please go ahead.
Do you want me to make the motion for the substitute, or do you want to go and move into the substitute first?
If you would be willing to wait, let's go ahead and get to the substitute, and you discuss those changes at that time
Okay.
with the entire bill. Is that agreeable with you?
That's perfect, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else would like to discuss just the base Senate Bill 22? Seeing none, I have a Senate committee substitute ending in .04C, which was distributed last week, and I move for its adoption. Do I have a second? Okay. Now at this time, we will discuss the Senate committee substitute. Senator Brattin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the substitute, there was testimony in regards to the length of time to be able to render a ruling in regards to the ballot language, thinking that the 6 weeks may be too short of a time frame. So what the substitute does is it moves it to 8 weeks instead of 6, so it gives that time frame, gives them much more time to be able to work with that. But it also has, I had originally done a committee sub, which was making it to where the 50 words the General Assembly has moves it to 100, equal with that of the initiative petition. And then also with the committee sub, it made sure it wasn't just the General Assembly, what we put forth in the joint resolution, it was also for the initiative petitions. That way it's all streamlined in the process for a court to rule on these. So that's what this does.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 22, the substitute? Senator Beck.
Yes, so I'll just ask the question. So you're saying now that the initiative petition would go back to the Secretary of State to be rewritten, whereas before it was strictly just the General Assembly?
So the original intent of the bill was actually a drafting error, was meant to encompass both already, but it was actually it was just an error in the drafting. So the intent of my bill was to ensure that both of those, would have to go, if rejected by the court, would have to be redrawn by the Secretary of State, not by the court.
Because I remember when some of the witnesses were testifying against it, and we were saying, well, it's not an initiative petition, but actually it really was. So it's kind of like they were testifying appropriately, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, so the intent of the bill was to encompass both, but it was drafted incorrectly. So, but yeah, that's what was fixed.
I think Senator Nuremberg, glad you made it here safely, and hopefully no one involved in the accident you had to wait in was hurt bad. But we're working on voting on Senate Bill 22, and there was a sub that was sent out at the end of last week. We have made it the point of adopting the sub, and we are in the discussion part of that, and I'm almost ready to move on, okay? So Senate Bill 22. I move that we do pass Senate Committee, all those, let's see, I got backup one. Back to the original motion I made. I have a Senate committee substitute ending in .04C, which was distributed last week, and I move for its adoption. I do have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, nay? It has been rolled into the bill. Now we're ready to do our final vote. I move that we do pass Senate Committee Sub Senate Bill 22. Do I have a second? Second. I do have a second. Matt, would you please call the roll?
Senators Black.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Beck.
No.
Brattin.
Aye.
Berger.
Aye.
Crawford.
Aye.
Nicola.
Aye.
Nuremberg.
By your vote of 6-2, Senate Committee Sub for Senate Bill 22 has been voted do pass. I now move to bring up Senate Bill 50. Do I have a second? I have a second. Senate Bill 50 was heard on January 21st and relates to regional jail districts as well as streamlining reimbursement to jails from the Department of Corrections and capping the fee on inmate may be charged to 12 cents per minute for domestic phone call. I move that we do pass. Whoa. Any discussion? I don't know. It's my bill. Could we just skip the discussion? Is there any discussion on Senate Bill 50? Many of us have heard that bill before. I move that we do pass Senate Bill 50. Do I have a second? I do have a second. Matt, would you please call the roll?
Senators Black.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Beck. Brattin. Berger. Crawford.
Aye.
Nicola. Nuremberg.
By your vote of 8-0, you have do pass Senate Bill 50. And the last bill that was noticed up to the people on the committee that we'd be discussing is Senate Bill 84. So I move to bring up Senate Bill 84. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Senate Bill 84 was heard last week. Senator Berger, would you care to give us a brief summary? Is your microphone on, Senator Berger?
This offense, this creates an offense and stiffer penalties for people harassing or tampering with election officials, basically.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 84? I move that we do pass Senate Bill 84. Do I have a second? I have a second. Matt, would you please call the roll?
Senators Black.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Beck.
Aye.
Brattin. Berger. Crawford.
Aye.
Nicola. Nuremberg.
By your vote of 7-1, you have do pass Senate Bill 84. I move that we leave executive session and return to the open session. Do I have a second? Do have a second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. We are now out of executive session. I think all of you should recognize that we were going to have public hearing on Senate Bill 62, provided by Senator Brown. Senator Brown's in the office, in the audience. Please come forward, Senator, and begin when you are ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 62, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. This past November, the voters of the state approved Amendment 7, which enshrined in our Constitution that only U.S. citizens should have the right to vote in our elections. This measure was met with overwhelming and bipartisan approval. The people of this state have made it clear where they stand on this issue, and it is now incumbent upon us to ensure that we follow through on the mandate and ensure that it is enforced. It is for this reason that I filed Senate Bill 62. First and foremost, Senate Bill 62 creates a requirement to provide documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote. Documentary proof of citizenship is defined in the bill and mirrors the requirements set forth in the Real ID Act of 2005. But it also includes some alternate means of proving citizenship in order to mitigate any additional burden that could potentially be placed on those who are legitimately permitted by law to participate in our electoral process. I also wanted to take precautions that this bill would only be applicable to those new registrants and that there couldn't be any misinterpretations or unintended consequences resulting in the promulgation of rules that could require those already registered or those who move to a different county to provide additional documentation in order to maintain the registration status they already had, which was the change, if you saw, I believe it was distributed, that was made in this substitute. My inspiration for this bill came several months back, and some of you might have gone through this process as well at this point, when I received the little card in the mail stating that I needed to renew my license and had the requirements for the new real IDs. And so as I was going through the list, you see you have to bring in, select from a list of documents that includes birth certificate, social security card, passport, things like that. And just to be safe, because I've had previous experiences that were frustrating when renewing my license plate, I brought in about a folder this thick of different documents just to make sure I had all my bases covered. And of course, this time I had everything I needed the first try and probably didn't use a fraction of them. Given the new Real ID requirements and the fact that Missouri already has voter ID laws in place, this bill represents a common sense reform that would not really create additional burdens or barriers in order to register, since the same requirements are now already needed in order to obtain the Real ID. It also contains a few other provisions. Current law states that Secretary of State and election authorities are required to perform system maintenance on a regular basis rather than using a vague term like regular. This version of the bill changes this to read that system maintenance will be performed on a quarterly basis. I had a great conversation with the clerks earlier today, and we're going to work with them and probably fine-tune this to make sure that this is something that a broad coalition of people can get behind. It also allows violations to be referred to the Attorney General's office rather than just, quote-unquote, an appropriate prosecuting attorney. It also has a provision that the clerk of each circuit shall, on or before the 10th day of each month, transmit to the Secretary of State a list of all people who identify themselves as not being citizens during their qualification to serve as a juror. Another common sense reform, the information is out there. Why don't we utilize that to tighten up our voter rolls? This proof of citizenship requirement has already been instituted in other states, including Louisiana, Arizona, New Hampshire, Kansas, Alabama, and Georgia, and provided the mandate that we were given by the voters with the overwhelming approval of Amendment 7 last November. I believe we have a responsibility to ensure that this policy is enforced and that the will of the voters is upheld. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions of the senator? Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, would you go over that 10-day? Is it every month that the clerks have to send something in? Is that what you said?
So it would be by the 10th day, on or before the 10th day of each month, transmit to the Secretary of State a list of all people who identify themselves as not being citizens during the juror qualification process. So those that give not being a legal citizen as the reason why they can't serve as a juror, that information would be transmitted. So it would be, you'd be reporting on the previous month.
And did the clerks have a concern with that piece of it at all? I know the county clerks have about 1 million duties right now, and I'm not saying this isn't a good idea. I just wondered if every month if that was going to be too cumbersome or a burden for them? I was just curious.
Well, that'd be the clerk of each circuit. So that wasn't raised, and I imagine that's probably the case. So that would be the circuit clerk. So I don't.
Oh, I'm
believe it-
sorry. You said circuit clerk.
Yes,
Gotcha. Okay. I was going down a different path. Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Senator Cole.
Senator, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for bringing this this bill up to help tighten up our election process. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Beck.
I guess the big difference I see here is you mentioned the real ID several times, but real ID is not a mandatory thing.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, so you can get a regular driver's license now currently. Like, I think probably some colleagues on this may have voted to make sure that we did, real ID wouldn't be a mandatory.
Yes. And I wasn't trying to make the point that every person that possesses an ID would have already met the real ID requirements, but that would be a minority, so that would mitigate any additional documentation they weren't already bringing to the driver's license office for those people that were going the route of getting the real ID. And as we all know, it's required, I believe, it will take effect later this year, it will be required for any kind of airline travel and other aspects of our society, and I suspect that those will increase. So while there will be...
Well, you can use other forms. You can use passports and other things to do air travel and do some other stuff. So real ID, you don't have to have real ID.
Correct, and you could use a passport as well as proof of your citizenship to register to vote in this bill as well.
So the folks that are already registered to vote won't have to go through this process, but you're saying any new?
Correct. And we, as drafted originally, we had a good level of confidence that was already not going to be the case, but just to make crystal clear, we went in there and added a provision that just completely spells it out, that anyone that's currently registered would be exempt from this, and so it's only applicable to new registrants.
Thanks.
Senator Brattin.
To briefly inquire, so just kind of follow up on that. It's not stating it has to be real ID, it's just the forms of documentation needed to obtain one. So while I decided to opt out of doing the real ID, I have the gold star on my license, but I still have the documents that I would need to obtain if I so choose.
Yes.
And that's basically what this is referring to, the documents that are required to obtain this. Those are eligible to prove, correct?
Correct. So yeah,
Okay.
the real ID in itself is not part of the requirement.
Yep.
It mirrors, some of the options mirror what are suitable requirements, documentation for the real ID. For instance, a birth certificate, passport, social security card, anything along those lines. So anything that suffices to prove citizenship for the real ID would also be applicable to this, as well as some other provisions as well that we included.
Yeah. One, we realize that voting is a constitutional right, and, I'm sure we're going to hear opposition as to say this is an infringement. But right before session, I actually went and bought a firearm. And have you bought a firearm before?
A few times.
Okay. So you realize that when you go and you go through the process of purchasing a firearm, what's the process that you have to go through in order for the vendor to give you your firearm?
Well, they run your name in the system. With a common name like Ben Brown, I generally have to wait a good amount of time before it's approved. So someone out there sharing the same name might be causing a little trouble. I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah, I am very, very familiar with that process, and I know that if I go in to purchase a firearm, that I'm probably going to have to be a little patient.
Now, during that process, though, don't they ask in that questionnaire you do probably 3 or 4 times if you're an illegal alien or not, or in the United States illegally? Actually, I'll answer that. Yes, 100% for a fact, and they ask it several times, and they ask it in different ways to try to catch you lying within that process. So I just wanted to preface constitutional right to constitutional right. I mean, the feds require for us to exercise that right, that we show ID, But we also take a test and have to pass it before we can exercise it, and one of which is making sure that you're a legal citizen. So thank you for this, and I think this just brings continuity. I think it's just common sense, so I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions from the senators? Seeing none. Would you please raise your hand if you're going to be testifying in favor? Those testifying in opposition? Okay, it's pretty balanced, all right? So we're going to go for and against. Everybody ready? Who wants to be our first person to come up front and testify in favor? And please, especially for those of you that are starting this, when you testify, there's a piece of paper that you turn in. That's why we keep track of that, so citizens realize who testified. We don't send any of your information out, but we need it for our reporting purposes. Anybody going to testify in favor, come up. Someone, please. Please state your name. Begin, ma'am, when you're ready.
My name is Becky Arps. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding SB62. My name is Becky Arps, and I'm the Director of Research for Americans for Citizen Voting. We work with legislatures and grassroots across the country to make sure that only United States citizens vote in municipal, state, and federal elections. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 sets forth certain voter registration requirements with respect to elections for federal offices. Section 5 of the NVRA requires that states offer voter registration opportunities at state motor vehicle agencies. Section 7 of the NVRA requires that states offer voter registration opportunities at certain state and local offices, including public assistance and disability offices. Section 8 of the NVRA contains requirements with respect to the administration of voter registration by states and requires states to implement procedures to maintain accurate and current voter registration lists. Section 5 of the NVRA also requires that the voter registration application must state each voter eligibility requirement, including citizenship, contain an attestation the applicant meets each requirement, state the penalties provided by law for the submission of a false registration application, and require the signature of the applicant under penalty of perjury. While I'm certain that our election authorities do the best they can, they could use some help. In 2020, 19 foreign nationals faced federal charges in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of North Carolina for illegally voting in 2016 federal elections. In 2020, at least 574 foreign nationals were registered in our neighboring state of Illinois through a computer bug in the driver's license renewal process. In 2018 in California, up to 1,500 non-citizens were mistakenly registered to vote in Pennsylvania. In 2019, they found at least 544 non-citizens had voted in Pennsylvania. Are these foreign nationals changing elections? Maybe, maybe not. But what is definitely happening in all of these cases is that their opportunity to become a citizen is put at risk. From the time that their registration to vote is found until someone does or does not decide to have leniency with them, they live in fear of being deported or losing their opportunity to become a citizen of this great country. That seems wildly unfair to them. Why don't we do something to reduce that risk? SB62 offers common sense requirements for registering to vote, the same requirements that are part of Real ID, as Senator Brown elaborated. Let's reduce the risk for non-citizens being registered accidentally and further protect the integrity of our elections. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 also requires in Section 8 that states implement procedures to maintain accurate and current voter registration lists. SB62 requires, as Senator Brown mentioned, the clerk of each circuit court to transmit to the Secretary of State, in a format prescribed by the Secretary of State, a complete list of all persons who identify as not being citizens of the United States. Seems pretty common sense. This doesn't increase the burden on the individual, yet provides an excellent opportunity for the voter rolls to be maintained as part of NVRA. The citizens of Missouri made it very clear last year that they believe voting in Missouri should be reserved for citizens. I would ask that you pass SB62 to protect non-citizens from getting into a bad situation, help maintain the Missouri voter rolls, and maintain the integrity of Missouri's elections.
Are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, ma'am. First person in opposition to Senate Bill 62, please come forward. Thank you, ma'am. And you have your form. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Denise Lieberman. I'm the Director and General Counsel of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, which is Missouri's nonpartisan state voting rights network that works to ensure that elections are free, fair, and accessible for all Missourians. We are opposed to Senate Bill 62 for several reasons. The previous witness brought up the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, and that is an applicable and very informative law for purposes of this piece of legislation. First of all, I'll take this in several sort of steps. First, the legislation would require documentary proof of citizenship in order to be able to register to vote. It also mandates a change to Missouri's voter registration form to indicate that was provided. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 does require that all states allow use of the federal form, which does not include that information. And accordingly, what would happen here in Missouri, were this to be enacted, is similar to what we've seen in the other states like Arizona, et cetera, Kansas, that you would have two different types of voter registrations. One voter registration form that would apply only to state and local elections, and a different voter registration form, because the federal form is mandated by the NVRA, for federal elections. That in turn then creates two different sets of registration cards, and then only people who complete the state and local registration card would be allowed to vote in state and local elections, but people who complete the federal form would be allowed to vote in federal elections. This has proven to be challenging and confusing in other jurisdictions and have it. I was glad to see that the sponsor today offered the substitute that you did, grandfathering in existing registered voters, because what we've seen in other states, for example, Arizona, is that it's been a bureaucratic challenge. So you may have seen in the news right before the November elections, there was a question in Arizona about 100,000, and actually Secretary of State Adrian Fontes said it was closer to 200,000 people who are registered to vote, but for whom they couldn't find their documentary proof of citizenship. And so they were going back to try and find those people. And so grandfathering them in here makes a lot of sense. But we'd still be doing this sort of two-tier voter registration system with two different types of registration cards. Second, the legislation requires that these documents be submitted by the person who is offering themselves to register to vote. And so I am imagining a scenario at a voter registration drive. We see third-party voter registration drives happen all the time. As you may be aware, Circuit Court recently struck down provisions of House Bill 1878 that place limitations on those conducting third-party voter registration. They typically take the registration forms from the voter and submit them on their behalf. If this documentary proof of citizenship is required to be provided only by the person registering, those third-party voter registration drives would be severely impaired, and it would still be incumbent upon that registrant to then separately take a second act after submitting their voter registration form to then write to their local election authority. Third, it seems to provide some challenges for people who register to vote and then wish to vote absentee. Currently, what happens since the law already requires people to present proof of identification when they register. Let's remember that. Already, and the ID that you have to provide is a list that is dictated and very similar to that required by federal law. If you register to vote and you're not actually, and you register to vote by mail, you have to present that form of identification the first time you vote. And if the first time you vote is by absentee, you then have to present that form of identification with your absentee application. And I may be misreading what was taken out and added to this bill, but it seems like it would eliminate that provision for people who vote absentee by mail for the first time. A couple other points. The piece of legislation also requires the circuit clerk to monthly submit a list of individuals who identify themselves as non-citizens when they are called for jury service. And I'd like to note that this is not a particularly accurate way to understand who is a citizen and who is not. The truth of the matter is there is no database in the United States of who is a citizen or not. And people get naturalized every single day. I know there's some folks from the League of Women Voters here who participate in naturalization ceremonies. In the city of St. Louis, where I'm from, there's at least 2 a week. And they register those people to vote right after those naturalization ceremonies. And so simply because somebody indicated they were ineligible for jury service a month or 2 before doesn't necessarily mean that they are not eligible when they submit that voter registration card. Finally, we are also concerned about the provision of this legislation that provides that the Secretary of State's Election Integrity Unit, upon review and finding probable cause of an election offense, would send that offense to the probable cause statement to the Attorney General rather than the local prosecuting attorney. We know that our system of government here in Missouri is that each of Missouri's 115 prosecuting attorneys has a broad discretion provided under law to make a determination about when a criminal act has occurred and make the decision on whether to pursue charges or seek an indictment. For all of those reasons, but particularly the concerns about the documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote, Missouri Voter Protection Coalition urges this committee to reject Senate Bill 62.
Any questions of the witness? Thank you, ma'am, very much. Next person supporting Senate Bill 62. Please come forward. Do we have anybody that's going to support it? Please state your name, and I do want to ask before you get started, do you have a witness form to be turned in, or you'll at least take back your seat and fill it out and bring it back,
yes,
please?
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Chandra Hendren, representing Heritage Action for America. Chairman Black and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present testimony in favor of Senate Bill 62. My name is Chandra Hendren, and I represent Heritage Action for America, a grassroots organization with over 2 million grassroots activists nationwide, including thousands of Missourians. Heritage Action urges the committee to support Senate Bill 62. Free and fair elections are the bedrock of our republic. Every citizen should know that their vote was cast and counted one time, and have absolute confidence that in Missouri it is easy to vote and hard to cheat. SB 62 provides a common sense approach to our election process, as well as ensures confidence in our election results by requiring documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote and keeping our voting records accurate. Requiring documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote is a safeguard that makes sense and discourages cheating while protecting those who may not yet be eligible to vote from violating the law. Keeping our voting records updated and accurate is a smart and logical step to take to ensure the integrity of our elections. Our nation was built on the principle of consent of the governed. One citizen, one vote. This bill ensures confidence in our election process and ensures the integrity of our election results. Heritage Action urges you to pass SB 62. Thank you for your time and attention in this matter.
Thank you. Do we have anybody want to question this witness? Thank you, ma'am, very much. Next person in opposition to Senate Bill 62.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jackie Barget. I'm a registered lobbyist here on behalf of Secure Democracy. Secure Democracy is a national election integrity organization that works to ensure elections are both fair and secure across the country. First off, I want to say thank you to the sponsor. We do agree with his intent. We do agree that only qualified U.S. citizens should be able to vote in Missouri, and appreciate the committee grandfathering those already registered voters out. We do have a couple logistical concerns with the documentary proof of citizenship portion of the bill. I know the sponsor has been talking with the county clerks and election authorities addressing some of those concerns that we also have. I will let them, as the election authorities and experts that know how that impact their election workers in the process, kind of walk through those, but I'm happy to answer any other questions that you all have.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Beck.
So you're okay with, so you're not okay with the bill?
We are opposed to the bill as written. Okay. I know the sponsor has kind of noted, he already made one change that we had concerns with about those that are already registered having to go back and try and figure out everyone having to prove their citizenship. But we've talked to the clerks and election authorities, and a lot of our concerns are what they're going to bring up and talk to you about when they get up here for informational purposes. And if those are addressed, then that takes care of most of our concerns.
Yeah, because I was trying to hold back a little bit on some of this stuff. The other thing I would guess, what would happen like if there was a purge of voters, and then those voters that were already grandfathered in would go to try to vote that day, and they said, well, you can no longer vote. Do they have to go back and, I mean, I don't know how that would play out. So.
I don't either, and those are some of our concerns as well. I think the clerks and election authorities will
Thanks.
address that. But
Any other questions of the witness? Thank you very much. I believe we're ready for a person willing to testify in favor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Amanda Bell. I'm with Secretary of State's office as our legislative director. We want to go in record of support for the bill. We think it's a move in the right direction to increase our elections integrity. We do understand that the bill is probably going to change as it progresses through the process. We also look forward to being a source of information as it moves through.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions of the witness? Yes, Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. It kind of brought to my mind when one of the other people were testifying. What do you see that process looking like? I'm kind of fixated, I think, on that circuit clerk piece and the jurors, when they send the information to you. What do you think that looks like after you get that list? And like somebody else brought up, what if they do become a citizen after the fact? Do you know what that's going to look like, how you're going to deal with that and make sure that they would come off the list after the fact? I'm just curious.
No, I can't answer to that, but what I can do is talk with our elections director. She's actually out at a conference today, or else I would have had her in here with us. But I will definitely get that response back to you and the rest of the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the witness? Thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Next person in opposition, please come forward. Next person in opposition, please come forward. Thank you, ma'am. You have your witness form.
Thank you, Mr.
Correct.
Chairman. Nancy Copenhaver with the League of Women Voters of Missouri. We would like to go on record as being in opposition to this, primarily because of making it more difficult to register to vote. We don't want non-citizens voting either, but we think that the current situation, the way it is in Missouri, seems to have a good prohibition on that regard, and we always want to make sure that we make it as easy to register to vote as we can. I'm just curious, too, as to how this would affect registering to vote online, which we do currently have. I mean, I don't know how you would submit a birth certificate or your passport if you were registering online currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the witness? Senator Brattin.
Thank you. So I guess you brought up the security, or I guess you didn't, but others have brought up the secure aspect of our elections. Do you think, I guess, an online option is a secure way if you're not able to verify that that person is or is not legal or even a resident?
Well, I understand that what happens when you register to vote online is that then the first time that you present to vote, you have to present the appropriate ID as required to vote now.
So how would this be any different than having to just display those documents?
It doesn't specify that in here, so I don't know how that would happen. I'm curious if maybe it needs to state that then in the bill as it's written.
Well, I mean, it states that a government-issued state identification would be suffice. Does that not suffice?
Well, that wouldn't suffice to prove that you were a citizen, would it?
Well, it states that if it does,
Because currently
it would.
you can get a driver's license in some places without being a citizen.
But it's marked as being non-citizen, though, correct?
Okay, I'm not familiar with that since we
So
don't
if you
do that in
went to
Missouri.
vote with an ID stating you were a non-citizen, that would then, I would assume, preempt that you need further documentation in order to cast your ballot. I mean,
So then you're saying you just show up the first time you would vote with your proof of citizenship? Just
Sorry, top of page 12, it addresses that.
addresses it? Okay.
Page 12. Cannot be completed until the documentary proof of, okay. So unless it's been proven, they wouldn't be able to go vote. Is that what? No.
It's already there.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, if for any reason you...
Cinder, when you answer, will you slide the microphone over? That way people listening in for sure will hear them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if for any reason the application wasn't accepted because the right documentation wasn't provided, you have until, if documentary proof of United States citizenship is supplied before 7 p.m. on election day, that person is deemed to have been registered on the date their registration was first received. So if for some reason there was any issues, a notice would be sent out informing anyone of that issue, and they would have the opportunity to bring those documents with them when they voted and wouldn't have any issues.
Yeah, so, I mean, in terms of the testimony against, I would say if you were just naturalized and you missed that window from the jury aspect of it, as a naturalized citizen, I just went through that whole process, I probably couldn't wait to go show and display that I'm now a United States citizen and capable to vote. So we act as though this is a big, massive hindrance, and I just don't see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the witness? Thank you, ma'am, very much.
Thank you.
Next person in favor of supporting Senate Bill 62. Do I have anyone?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Alex Eaton representing Secure Election Project this afternoon. Want to go on record in support of Senate Bill 62 and appreciate Senator Brown bringing this forward. Specifically, we support the part of just the maintenance and upkeep of the voter maintenance rolls to the quarterly standard. So happy to take any questions, but specifically wanted to highlight that portion.
Thank you. Any questions of this witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do I have anyone in opposition left to speak? Please state your name, and you did hear about the form, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Jonathan Schmidt. I'm a registered lobbyist and attorney with the ACLU of Missouri. We want to go on record today in opposition to Senate Bill 62. Our main concern here is, as Senator Brown pointed out, when I got my real ID, I brought in a stack of papers as well. Granted, you didn't use all of them, but I think the issue is that aligning the requirements to register to vote with the requirements to obtain a real ID is just going to make it harder for people to register to vote. I think in addition, the personal submission part of your proof of citizenship would be a problem. I don't understand, I guess, what the bill does not make clear is a certified birth certificate, right? How do I provide that? If I'm registering by mail, how do I provide that to the local election authority? Can I provide a copy, a photocopy, or does it have to be an actual certified copy that I then have to pay for and then surrender to the local election authority in order to prove that I'm a citizen? Mailing that in, I'm not going to get that back. And then I guess finally to Senator Brattin, I think your point about the Second Amendment. So I'm a gun owner. I'm a veteran. I do think there is a difference between the right to bear arms and the right to vote. The right to vote is much more fundamental to our system of government. It's essential to our democracy. And yeah, welcome to take any questions.
Senator Brett.
So did we vote our way into this nation? Well, I mean, that's a legit question. I mean, that's not.
We didn't, Senator, but
how did we do that?
Through the Revolutionary War.
Through what? The capability of being armed right? So we didn't vote our way out of tyranny, right? We shot our way out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I understand. I guess
and does the Supreme Court say that constitutional rights are greater than the other? In fact, they've actually ruled the exact opposite, that they're all on equal playing fields.
Well, and I guess my point is Senator, is not that they're on.
That's what you just said, that they are on different tiers.
I do understand.
They're not.
Maybe I misspoke. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, you talked about the form that you have to fill out and the attestation that you are a citizen and you're eligible to purchase a firearm, right? So that same attestation, or a very similar attestation, is already on the voter registration card as required by federal law.
Well, it's on my license, but every single time I go to exercise my Second Amendment, I still have to go through the same process, literally every single time, of asking the same questions every single time. I mean, it's just the process of vetting and ensuring you are who you say you are. Now, the Real ID documentation, it clearly states that it has to be the documentation in order to obtain that, so it would have to be a certified copy. It couldn't be just a Xerox copy. So that the ambiguity is not there. It states that it has to be what is readily available to be able to obtain your Real ID. Mm-hmm. And it's that one time when you register to vote. It's not every single time you go to vote, correct?
Yes, I understand that, Senator.
Thank you.
But I do just want to add one thing to, you can purchase firearms privately. You can purchase and sell firearms privately, and that background check does not factor into that transaction. So you can still, I guess my point is, you can still exercise your right to bear arms without going through that verification process. When you go into a gun store, for example. I guess that was really my main point, is that there are other ways to exercise your right to bear arms. There is only one way to vote.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you. Anyone else to testify in favor of Senate Bill 62? Please come forward, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Bev Allen. I'm the president of Liberty Link, Missouri, and also the chairman of the Warren County Republican Committee, and would like to go on record in support of Senate Bill 62.
Thank you. Are any questions of this witness? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else in opposition?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. Our opposition to the bill is based upon a general, our resolution, our belief that the legislature should seek to remove, not create more barriers to eligible citizens participating in voting in our electoral process. If you look at the existing law, all of the forms that currently qualify for registration do constitute a proof of U.S. citizenship, and so we think that aspect is unnecessary. Also, the requirement to have this stuff be done personally could have an adverse impact on elderly folks. If you think about, say, a mom in her 90s in a nursing home, she probably could benefit from some help in getting registered to vote if she needs to register. If for some reason she's been relocated. We think that the net effect of the bill is to reduce access for certain persons. And like I said, our belief is we should be trying to remove those barriers for eligible citizens to be able to vote. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Senator Brattin?
This is the NEA's official?
Yes, absolutely. We have a strong position on voter
I'm just
participation.
really confused that the NEA is coming out on election issues.
This is nothing new. We've opposed restrictions on voting rights. You do have to remember, all of our folks, all of our members work for elected officials. And so the proper function of elections is critical to the success of public entities, school districts, and it matters to the proper functioning of all of our public functions.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions of the witness? Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Anyone else in support of Senate Bill 62? Please come forward, and there will be a sheet up here that I need you to fill out.
Fill it out.
All right, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Duncan, and I'm with the Gasconade County Republican Club. I am here to speak in favor of SB 62. I believe that a person should have to show citizenship of the United States to be able to register to vote in our elections in the state of Missouri. As far as our election system maintenance goes, I think it's fair that it be done on a quarterly basis by our Secretary of State. As someone who just previously got called to jury duty, I think people use excuses all the time not to go to jury duty, but I think if one of them's that they're not a citizen, that our Secretary of State and our Attorney General will be informed. And if our election authority proves that someone that wasn't eligible to vote in our elections went ahead and voted in them anyway, that our Secretary of State and our Attorney General be notified as well. And that's all I've got.
Okay, are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. Anyone to testify in opposition to Senate Bill number 62? Going once. Go. Yes. Anyone else in favor before I go to informational only? Anybody else in favor? Seeing none. Those for informational purposes only, please come forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rick Stream. I'm the Republican Director of Elections in St. Louis County and a former member of the Missouri House of Representatives. It's always good to come back to the Capitol and see people that actually served with me. I've been out of the office for over 10 years now. I'm here for informational purposes only. Obviously, the St. Louis County Election Board wants to ensure that only citizens become registered voters. And the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities did pass a resolution calling for the sharing of citizenship information between the Department of Revenue and the DMV and election authorities. This would enable, this type of information sharing would essentially eliminate the possibility of non-citizens registering to vote by accident. This type of information sharing is the most effective and realistic way to improve security of the voter rolls. And just so for information purposes, my county has 1 million residents and 750,000 registered voters. So we have a lot of people voting in elections. As it was mentioned earlier, Arizona is currently, we thought at the time, the only state with an implemented version of proof of citizenship similar to what is being proposed in this bill. The main difference is that Arizona has information sharing between the DMV and election officials. This enables election officials to check citizenship status without most voters having to provide physical documentation to the election office. In 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the appellate court decision that allowed Arizona to implement strict proof of citizenship for state elections, but not for federal offices, as was mentioned earlier. The court ruled that Arizona must still accept the federal voter registration form, which doesn't require proof of citizenship. As a result, Arizona must maintain a bifurcated voter registration system in which most voters receive a full ballot when they vote, while a small minority of voters receive a federal-only ballot. Only about 1% to 2% of voters in Arizona fall into this federal-only category because they do have information sharing with the DMV. If there was no sharing, then it's safe to say that at least 10% to 20% of voters would fall into the federal-only category. So bifurcating the voter registration system this way requires extra type of ballot for almost every ballot style. This is an administrative nightmare for most election authorities and election judges at the polling places. If implemented in its current form, this legislation would lead to the bifurcation of the voter registration system and lead to extra and costly work for election officials and significant numbers of voters only voting in federal races. So if we do have the sharing with the DMV, it would greatly reduce the number of people who would be voting only in federal elections on the federal-only ballot. I would argue, too, that in my time as election director, it's been just past 8 years now, that is the biggest challenge that we have, is to ensure that the people at the DMV are actually checking and making sure that people show up with the proper documentation. Because if that is the first line and really the only line of defense, once somebody gets a driver's license, and has been mentioned a number of times behind me by folks, if you register online or those registration drives, you don't have to provide any information there, but the first time you show up to vote, you have to prove that you are a registered citizen, and that's done through the driver's license process almost exclusively. So if that process, if there's a breakdown at the local DMV offices around the state, then we have problems. Okay, I'm not saying it's happening, I'm just saying that is where it needs to happen, where the security is. And most county clerks would have, it would be a nightmare for them to have two types of ballots. In St. Louis County, because of the system that we have, where we allow people to vote anywhere, and we basically have a ballot on demand. We print the ballot. We would just make a change into our system of how we print out the ballots, and we would print out the correct ballot based on what category they fall into. But most counties, and I've got Kurt Barr behind me to testify for information purposes only. He's from St. Charles County. He might have a lot more difficult time than I do. And certainly the small counties are going to have trouble with that, so I'd be aware of that. So with that, thank you. I'll take any questions.
Any questions with Senator Beck?
Thank you. Thank you for your service to St. Louis County. You guys do a great job running the elections there. I've said that numerous times, and I'm been grateful for you in that capacity. So it sounds like this would be a duplication of efforts that already happen, for the most part, of checking somebody's citizenship or before you vote. And I'm not trying to get you in hot water here, but it also sounds like there would be like voters wouldn't be on the same plane, right? I mean, we'd have different rights. Some voters would only be able to vote in federal. So, but if that wording was changed, something like that would be able to be acceptable. Is that what you're basically saying?
Like all the other county clerks, our office has, a list of registered voters, and we update it right up to the last minute, literally 5 p.m. on the day before the election. We do a download and make sure that we have the very latest people who are registered. Now, you have to register 28 days in advance. I'm talking about basically who has voted early, absentee or no excuse. So, but we take the list of people who are registered to vote, who have said they're registered to vote, if they registered online or by mail through the registration efforts at local churches or whatever, they have to come in with documentation. That documentation is, in almost all cases, is a driver's license.
Yeah.
Very seldom does anybody come in with their passport or any other form. It's one of the 4 forms that the state law requires. So once they're in the rolls and they've shown a driver's license, there is nothing that we can do. We have to accept them as a voter, okay? So I think, again, the key is, and I'm not saying it's a duplication of effort, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, from our standpoint.
Well, I was saying that. I think it's a duplication of effort.
We're election authorities. We're ministerial. We run the elections. We don't determine who is registered to vote. I will say this: if people register online, we begin the process right then to check. We check with the Social Security Administration. We check with other government agencies to see if they are a citizen. So that's part of the process, but they still have to show up with documentation that first day. Okay. And by the way, if there's any of the preliminary effort that we have that proves that they're not who they say they are, they don't go on the rolls. It's a very tight system what we run.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions to this witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for informational purposes only? Thank you, Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee. I am Kurt Barr, Director of Elections for St. Charles County. As Rick Stream just said, the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities support the federal and state law that requires citizens only to vote. We also support the ability to know who are citizens so that we can make sure our voter rolls are accurate. As Rick Stream had mentioned, one of the things that we would love is for more information from the DMV so that we know who is a citizen and who is not. Unfortunately, the only thing that we get is a driver's license number. We don't know whose driver's license is real ID. We don't know whose driver's license is not. We don't know if it's a non-driver's license state ID. We just know it's a driver's license number. And so in order to make this bill work, we would need a lot more information from the DMV to know that proof of citizenship information had been, in fact, given to the Department of Revenue so that we would know that to be the case as well. There was some discussion about online voter registration. The way I understand this legislation, any brand new voter registration could not happen online with the current system that we have because there's no mechanism to show either real ID or passport or birth certificate. So either the Secretary of State's office would have to change it where somebody can upload an image of those documents, or it could only be used for registered voters who are updating their voter registration. Now, while the majority of voters who register do so at the DMV, we do have a good 30 to 40% of voters use the online system in order to update their voter registration. Very few people come into the election authority office to update their voter registration and to provide any documentation. A couple of other things that had been mentioned. The first two ladies who testified both in for or against, they both mentioned the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. And the one thing that wasn't made clear in that is Section 6 of the NVRA is the section that has a federal application for somebody to register to vote. That application has no mechanism to show proof of citizenship. It's a checkbox to say, I am a citizen, but has no mechanism for proof. Now, Arizona is the only state that has this system implemented. A couple other states have passed it, haven't fully implemented it yet, and there are several states, including Michigan and Missouri, that are working on implementing this type of system. But what Arizona found when they implement this system is that the court said, the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, could allow the state of Arizona to have a a waiver of this Section 6, a waiver of this the federal ballot application. But since they don't, they have to have a bifurcated voter registration system. So all the voters who are registered, there has to be either two systems or a checkbox. I'm not sure exactly what Arizona's system is to indicate these are voters who have shown proof of citizenship, and these are registered voters who have not shown proof of citizenship. And unfortunately, Arizona has had some database issues with keeping those straight. But there is the opportunity. I don't know of any state that has actually gotten this waiver, but there is the opportunity of the state petitioning to have a waiver from this requirement of a bifurcated system. But what that means is that the federal application would basically have to say that only voters who are registering to vote per the state law can be accepted, which means that instead of having a bifurcated system, you have a single system, but anybody who can't show that proof of citizenship can't register to vote. So that's how the dual bifurcated voter registration system ends. So if you have a voter who doesn't choose to do the voluntary Real ID, or doesn't choose to do a voluntary passport, and or doesn't have their ID, but who is a citizen, could have issues registering to vote with the language as is. But that is probably a small number, but it is not a number of zero. Because of that, because of the process to ask for a waiver for to the EAC, for the states not to have a bifurcated system, or to implement a bifurcated system, there does need to be some time before August 28th of this year in order for us to be able to do one or the other. And so I didn't have the opportunity to speak with the sponsor earlier. The sub does actually answer one of the big concerns that we had, are people grandfathered in or not? But timeline is another concern that we have. And as people mentioned, the online voter registration could be a complication. Like I said, I think any new person might have an issue. Any existing voter updating their registration would not. But there are a lot of people who register or update the registration online. And so we do have the potential of having to, if the EAC doesn't give us this waiver, having to have a bifurcated system, which will create issues. I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying there are potential complications. So I'm in support of the intent of this bill. Definitely in support of the Department of Revenue sharing more information with the election authorities, and I appreciate the sponsors' conversation with us already and intent to continue to have that conversation. We look forward to having conversations as well.
Thank you. Any questions of this witness? Thank you. Anyone else for informational purposes? Seeing none. Senator Brown, any closing remarks?
Yes, thank you. A concern was raised, and it's something I've been aware of for some time since I started studying this issue, and I actually spoke to people that were involved in this legislation in Arizona about it creating some kind of bifurcated system. And let me be very clear, that is not the intent here. In fact, I want to do everything I can to avoid being in that situation. And, I go back, it's probably one of the more research-intensive bills that I've had, just because there's so much history with litigation and what other states have enacted. Arizona was mentioned a few times. To my knowledge, they're the only state that has a split system like this. There was an opinion issued by the Supreme Court in 2013 that I believe was referenced, but it's important to point out that they didn't actually make a judgment on Arizona's interpretation of the accept and use provision, the part of the Voting Rights Act that says that states have to accept and use the federal form. And even in their opinion, they go through, it's about 46 pages, not too hard of a read, but they go through and they kind of debate it on both sides about how that could be interpreted. And use an example like, with the airplane voucher, an airline can advertise that they're going to accept this voucher, but they can still require someone to provide their ID at the time that they board. I look forward to the opportunity to continue working with the clerks and the Secretary of State's office, because I want to ensure that when implemented, it's given the proper time, as well as making sure that it's implemented to where we're still going to only have one form. I don't want to have two forms. So if there is some kind of legal challenge, I would rather let that be resolved than having to go towards this dual system. Because you have the Supreme Court has been hesitant to really come down solidly on the interpretation, at least the state of Arizona had, and it's because they have other options, other remedies available, as they stated in their opinion. They had the ability to do the bifurcated system. They had argued that they had other mechanisms that would allow them to obtain the information needed for enforcement. But they do point out several things that support the position of Arizona as well. For example, and I'm quoting here, since the power to establish voting requirements is of little value without the power to enforce these requirements, Arizona is correct that it would raise serious constitutional doubts if a federal statute precluded a state from obtaining information necessary to enforce its voter qualifications. Other than implementation, and I will try to wrap this up as quick as I can. I spent way too much time reading about this stuff yesterday. You can file a request with the ESC to have state-specific instructions added to the form. So this is something that was attempted by Arizona in 2005 when they first passed the rule along these lines. And at the time, there were only 4 members, and there was a 2-2 vote on whether to add the state-specific instructions that would allow them to have the system in place without having the dual system. With a 2-2 vote, you need a majority in order to actually have movement, so nothing happened then. At the time, the Supreme Court issued its opinion in 2013. As was pointed out in the opinion, the ESC lacked a quorum, which made it so that they had no opportunity. There was no way for them to resubmit that and request that. So what I'm proposing is we move forward with this, craft the language in a way to where we would ensure it's only being implemented with a single system as we have now, and also that we file that request and see if we can have state-specific language to avoid any potential litigation, like I'm sure will come with some of these other states that passed it. But it's getting to the point now where you have, I believe, 6, 7 other states that have this passed, to where the Supreme Court is going to have to weigh in. And so I look forward to that, and I think that we need to continue moving forward. I lay out a responsible plan to do this in a way that's not going to upend our system. It mitigates any kind of burden to those trying to register, and it can really give us just a very large step forward in really restoring confidence in our system of elections. Because it's not just about the process, it's about perception, and it's kind of undeniable that there are doubts about the electoral process in this country on both sides of the aisle, and it's something we need to resolve.
Thank you, Senator Brown. At this time, I move we adjourn. Do I have a second? Listen to that. All in favor say aye. Aye. We adjourn.